For our group discussion, we're going to be talking about music and um, just technology like that and how it affected its time periods. So for me, it's not technology, but the actor I chose that stood out to me the most was Edward R. Murrow. It talked about him in the section where it's talking about like television, and I thought it was really interesting how he kind of like solidified CBS as like a really big broadcasting station in the US, and how he kind of brought this more candid, personal spin to sharing the news, which I think you see a lot nowadays. Let me look at my notes. Yeah, like I said, the textbook said his show, See It Now, served as an inventive model for investigative reporting on television. And I do think you can still see that impact nowadays in modern television. So that's kind of why I chose him, because I thought, you can still see his impact even though a lot of people might not have heard of him before. Um, and yeah, um, also just kind of to more elaborate on what that impact was exactly, I kind of gleaned that he kind of set this precedent for mass media in that it's kind of a guiding force for the public, especially in times of turmoil. And I think that is especially relevant nowadays with all like the political unrest going on. So I think it's really impressive that he kind of, not reinvented, but he definitely brought something new to um, not just television, but mass media in general.
Awesome. So when I was kind of going through my second reading, I was kind of looking at the same stuff and considering the prompt and kind of how it related to the reading. And I at first thought that like music, and especially the folk music movement with like Woody Guthrie, would be like the most influential for the time. And then I started thinking about maybe how television and like broadcasting has maybe not for the time it was in because not everyone could have access to that. Like because it was so expensive or so rare. The technology was so, I guess, just complicated or difficult to come by. That maybe it wasn't as influential in the time, but I think that's the one that has had the most impact on our world overall. Just considering like short form content nowadays, how we communicate, and how important imaging is to just everything, to political messages, to how we teach in classrooms, to even what entertainment we choose. But I was also just really interested in the whole folk movement with Woody Guthrie, just because, like, for the time, that was the most accessible, and I just think they're pretty awesome, like folk singers. Just the whole movement in general, how like they use that form of mass communication to just communicate with the masses, especially through political messages or just longing of like the common people, I suppose.
I wanted to add to what you were saying about uh, the the filmmaking part, um, or imaging. I thought like the technology that kind of stood out to me was the filmmakers of Edwin Muybridge, who started that first motion picture, and then from there it just kind of expanded into like what is now like television. I just wanted to add that.
Oh, yeah, kind of expanding, like kind of upon what you guys were saying. The thing that stood out to me most was like how the people who were in the radio hosts back in the day, how they were able to build their reputation and be able to become celebrities in their sense, and they were able to build such a following that whenever they were able to expand to television, that they were able to further improve and expand their media as they were also now able to include a visual aspect of it, which obviously further led to how they were having news stations and what's it called, and media further expanding. And I think that kind of like compares to today's society, how it further expanded, how like and comparing it to today's society, how YouTubers and like were kind of the popular form of media back in the day and how they like were able to build their content. But as time changed, TikTok and other platforms take over and how they were able to move over to the different platforms to do their content, also expand and change their content to further change the media and to be able to have an effect on the media in general. So I thought that was kind of cool to like compare them in my head. But that was the biggest thing that I thought that had an impact in my opinion.
Um, Adding on to like popular forms of media, I think like the most popular form of media back then, and like the most popular form of technology back then had been the radio, because I feel like without it, then we wouldn't have been getting like all the stuff that we have today, and especially like for back then, it was very useful for like communication or like learning about like things that are going on around the world, and and it was also a good form of entertainment back then. It was a good form of media because they would do like shows through the radio, and I feel like the radio has been like the most important form of media back then.
Like when they talked about how like Britain had like I think bought like most of the early like I forget what it was, but I think it was something to do with radio broadcasting for their military because they had control of I think part of the Atlantic Ocean, like a large chunk of it, and like that was like I don't know just how I guess countries just spring on like what they estimate or guess is going to be the most powerful means of communication and how like I remember being little and like radio was huge still like my grandpa listened to the radio and my dad did when he was working how much that has changed but I can imagine that when that first came out like that first like wireless communication that was like huge for countries of power. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Yeah, radio was very important back then, and I think uh, when Pearl Harbor was attacked, I think it was through the radio. That's how a lot of the Americans found out about it. So it was very important back then, and yeah, same thing with me. I was when I was young, my I grew up listening to the radio a little bit, like through the car and all that. So it was very important piece of technology. Even in today's time, it's still being used mostly through like cars and all that. So even though like it's not used as much, it's still pretty important, especially nowadays.